Hey everybody, welcome back to Foyr's Talks. Today we have the privilege of talking to Andrew Joseph, who also is one of our sponsors for this event. So thank you very much. Very instrumental in providing a lot of speakers, a lot of content. So we thank you, Andrew, and the team.
Absolutely.
AJPR is here to discuss how to hire a PR agency, which I actually think Andrew knows a little bit about. Which is a subject that many of our design community folks have been asking about. So let's welcome Andrew to the main stage. And Andrew, take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much. And also, it's very kind of you to consider Andrew Joseph PR a sponsor of the entire Design Summit. To the listening audience, I'll give a little background. Foyr had been following Andrew Joseph PR on Instagram and had reached out to ask if any of our clients would like to be on a panel. And I jumped at the opportunity, and between other programming this week that we do with Aspire Design and Home magazine, as well as the designer experience with Designers Today magazine, we organized and executed 13 different panels. So it's been a bit of a crazy week. And with that said, I usually feel that I am much more prepared for these presentations, but organizing 13 other panels probably makes me a little woefully unprepared. But I've been speaking about and working in this industry for 20 years, so I'll give you what industry knowledge I have. I started my career in New York in 1999. First working at Vanity Fair magazine and then Allure magazine in the editorial department. But at that time I was in beauty and fashion. I felt like starting my career working in the publishing world really gives me an advantage being a public relations professional. I remember many, years of setting in ideas meetings where it was required that junior and senior editors were responsible for pitching ideas that would eventually find their way to the pages of those magazines. That, I believe, has given me a unique perspective on how the editor's mind works and what it is that we are supposed to do and how we can be useful as a public relations company. I did fashion and beauty public relations for many years after working in the magazine world. I did backstage beauty during New York Fashion Week, all the bells and whistles that come with that industry. But after about 8 years of working in fashion beauty, I 100% hit a wall going 100 miles an hour. And I thought, if I have to talk about where your hemline is supposed to be or what color is supposed to be on your cheekbone one more season, I was going to gargle glass. Just couldn't do it any longer. I found I was 30 something. I had a 30 something kind of like midlife crisis, not knowing which direction I wanted to go. Took a little bit of time trying to do a jewelry line on my own. And I'll probably get to this, I'll circle back to this later in the presentation, but I found it very interesting that I thought, because I have this PR background, this solid PR background, that I would be able to promote my own designs. And I felt like an abject failure at doing so. I learned through that process, as many of us learn through our mistakes and our failures, what you're really good at. And I found out through that process that I'm really good at being a public relations professional that person behind the scenes that doesn't necessarily need to be in the spotlight. Lesson learned. So after that little small failure in trying to create a jewelry line, I found a job working with architects, interior designers, and luxury home furnishings. I immediately fell in love with this industry. It felt very much at home from the very beginning. I think, you know, no matter what industry you're in, whether you're an accountant or a banker or a dentist, there are certainly insane, toxic people in all industries. But by and large, I feel like the interior design community has really amazing community. If I can be philosophical for a moment, I think one of the things that made the fashion and beauty industry so unattractive to me is the frenetic and ephemeral life cycle of that industry. You had to do season of different collections. And I think, you know, when you think about people that work with people in their home, there is a different sophisticated creativity that is required, because the home, and I think, you know, in COVID, where we're in our homes a lot more, we are acutely aware of how the home sustains our souls and helps us with the outlook that we have of the world. I think that's a really significant thing, and I'm very happy to be in this business. I worked at the other PR firm for almost 6 years, but what I have great respect for that PR firm. They've been in business for close to 40 years now. But, you know, one thing, you know, even when I was in the editorial world, there wasn't such a thing as social media or a blog or a podcast. And there certainly wasn't the Zoom averse that we all exist in now. So, you know, I feel like that firm didn't really evolve with the changing nature of the way we access and disseminate communication. I felt actually that they were rather resistant with that change. And so I felt after almost 6 years that it was time to go out on my own. I was very frightened with the failure of my jewelry launch if I could go out on my own, but I felt, you know, I'm old enough that going to work for someone else didn't seem like the right path. This summer I celebrated my 8th year on my own with Andrew Joseph PR, and I've had some amazing experiences touring chateaus in France, castles in Belgium, palazzos in Venice, with clients all over the world. Really very, very pleased that we continue to thrive. I also am a contributing editor at Aspire Design and Home, as I mentioned. And at the very beginning of COVID, I wrote an article for Aspire saying that this moment in time could actually be, there could be a silver lining for the interior design community, because as people are captive to their home, people are going to want to change it. Their relationship with their home is acutely going to change. And I thought maybe in the fall, things would turn around and I would get some new clients. I did lose 2 in the very beginning, but I signed happily 5 new clients over the summer, and I have 3 more starting this fall. So I'm actually ending up in the middle of the pandemic with more clients than I started with, which is amazing. good time to be in the architecture and design business because things are kind of booming. So public relations. I think public relations has really evolved and changed, even in the years that I've practiced it, even in the years that I've been only in the interiors world. I think in the past, you thought it was getting your projects published in a magazine. I think what we do and what we offer our clients is it's so much more complex and so much more robust than that. We handle social media for clients. We do content creation. In the old world before COVID, if a client wanted to do licensing and get a collection with a company, we would, while we are not licensing agents, we would steer them in that direction and open doors. If they wanted to do a book, we would put them in touch with the right people so that they could get published. I think right now in this world, and I think this conference is proof to that in a way, in this world of COVID, we are in an age, a golden age of public relations, because I want you to think of it this way. In the old world, no matter how well, how strong of a relationship you had with an editor, no matter how strong your own writing skills are, no matter how beautiful a home was, or how smart an idea was for a magazine to write about it, at the end of the day, I personally, and anyone that works in public relations, had very little control of things moving forward, because it's an editor that is an editor, a journalist, a writer that is going to make the final decision. When the world did turn to Zoom, I think I was as irritated with it as a platform as everyone else was. And that quickly changed for me, because I have a client that worked with me at the old firm and came with me when I started my own. So we've been working with each other for 14 years now. Did an Instagram Live with a showroom in New York. And there were 78 people that showed up to that Instagram Live. And after the Instagram Live, he called me and he's like, oh, is this really worth it? And I said, if you did a keynote at a design center during a market, you might have had 30 or 40 people show up to your event. And in this instance, you were not only talking to other design professionals, but design enthusiasts and potential clients. So after I had that experience, I really doubled down in finding this to be a really unique way to have full control over your messaging and your content and what you're disseminating to the world. And you have a world that's hungry for that information. So for Aspire Design and Home, I do a weekly webinar on various topics. When Foyr reached out and asked if I wanted to do these webinars and presentations with clients, I was like, yes, I do. And you've seen some of my wonderful clients in many of the presentations here, and I hope you enjoyed and learned from them. I see I'm about 15 minutes in, so the way public relations professionals work, we work on a monthly retainer. We prefer to do a year contract. And the reason for that is, magazines are working 3 or 4 months out. And so when you start with a client, you have to build momentum. You have to think of PR as a marathon and not a sprint. It is something that takes time and consistency, lots of consistency, in order to really build a brand through public relations. Nothing happens overnight. I have competitors that charge a lot more than I do. I have calculatedly chosen to be mid-range, because I think what that means is that clients tend to work with me for longer periods of time instead of just a year, because I am an affordable luxury and an investment, absolutely an investment in themselves. As I mentioned, what we do for clients is more robust than just traditional public relations, and maybe I'll give a case study quickly that gives an example of the complexities of what we do for clients. Sarah Von Driel, who you may have listened to earlier today, is a client. I think you probably learned that she came from a branding background turned into a wallpaper and fabric designer. She was brand new, really didn't know how to navigate this industry. And so not only do we handle her social media, we do traditional public relations, we also do business development. We steered her in the right direction of what showrooms aesthetically fit with her, and excited to share that she, in a year and a half of operating a business, is in 3 amazing showrooms, and Hune, San Francisco being, I think, one of the showrooms that have dealt with this new world order in a most sophisticated way. So we're quite honored. Another, I think, example that I want to make sure to pull across is that I think when you are hiring a public relations firm, you need to really be in a place that you must commit that there is going to be a lot more work for you. And I'll give an example and a case study here as well. I worked with an AD 100 designer, I will never name names, that Elle Decor wanted to cover for a story. And I think that this client thought working with a public relations firm was like advertising. You write a check and you see results. Doesn't work that way. You have to do your homework, or you don't see the results. You don't get a return on your investment. But this designer, Elle Decor, needed information. They needed something written. They needed photography. And after a week of like 7 or 8 emails, 7 or 8 texts, voicemails that were left, nothing. Well, Elle Decor is on a deadline and they had to move on. And the following week, this client was like, well, what happened with Elle Decor? And I'm like, Elle Decor's done. They had to ship an issue, and that story opportunity is no longer available. But here's an example of a client that I started working with in February, who really has a gold star and has now a lot of press to show for it, because when COVID hit, the whole editorial world shifted to no longer evergreen stories, but stories that related to the New World Order. So there were leads coming in 100 miles an hour, and this client answered every single one of them and has been in the Wall Street Journal 3 times, Apartment Therapy, Elle Decor, House Beautiful, Interior Design Magazine, like just one after another. Another great example is the Wall Street Journal asked designers how they would design an RV. And this client said, well, you know what? I've never designed an RV, I've also never designed a yacht or a private plane, but I've always thought about how to do that, and the same principles apply. She was the lead-in quote in the Wall Street Journal story because she thought creatively and was able to tackle that at hand. I see that I'm 10 minutes in, or 10 minutes left. So I think there's also some things that you as a designer absolutely want to think about, so that if you ever move forward with hiring an interior designer, that you have the proper assets on hand. Document, document, document. Always have your photograph or your project's photograph. Also, a tip with who you hire as a photographer, make sure you understand what your usage rights are. Some photographers will charge you more if you have full usage, but that little extra more means that you have a lot extra more ways to play with them. If you have restrictions on your usage, it can handicap you. So that's really definitely something to think about. Another lesson that I've learned in COVID, which is a very interesting insight, and it is a client that was the former photography editor at Elle Decor turned interior designer. And she said to me, you know, I really see photography in interiors 100% different than I did as an editor, because as an editor, I wanted to tell the big story, the full story, the entire house, the entire room. But in this world where it's social, and if you want to be able to tell different stories in your home, the story of an entryway, the story of a hallway, the story of how rooms connect, that the way she will photograph her projects moving forward is not just the big picture, but every little picture and every little story that's in your home, because then you can get more out of your photography. There's probably so much more I could say, but I think that there's some questions, and we only have some few minutes left. Zoe, do you tell me those, or do I just look in the Q&A section?
I have them, Andrew, for you. I'll queue a few up for you.
Okay, fantastic.
So how do you know if a potential client is a good fit for you?
That's a very good question. I just don't work with toxic people. I'm too old, and I think that that's the privilege of having your name on the door, that if people feel like that they're going to be problematic or micromanage or not trust that we have a tremendous skill set, that's a red flag that it's going to be an uncomfortable relationship. But to answer that on a more professional level, I think it's really great when a designer comes to you and they really know who they are. They've done the branding in their own mind and they know they have a story. If you're like a pretend designer and you're just like doing this as a hobby and your backbone isn't in it, I know that's not really a good client. I like to work with people who take their businesses seriously, because that means we have a lot to work with and that we can help them tell that story.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I have another one here. This one's pretty good too, Andrew. It says, for a budding interior designer, how do they carve out a budget to afford a PR agency like you?
Get more projects. but no,
Sell.
okay, so yeah. You know, there are definitely ways. Amy, anyone that's listening, write this down. For anyone that can't quite afford a PR firm, there is a woman who I've spoken with on panels, and she's a lovely human being. Her name is Amy Fleury, and she's based in Georgia. And she has a kit and a blog that and a list of design editors that teaches you how to do PR on your own. Now, or at least it gives you the foundation to know what public relations is and how you can attempt to do it. That's definitely helpful. But that said, you know, I think because I'm listening to, or because the audience that's listening to me knows when one of your clients tries to do the design that you're hired to do, it's a very frustrating process. So that's one of the reasons you always want to work with a public relations professional, because we eat, sleep, drink, breathe it all the time. And that's what we're good at.
Awesome. Another question just came in. How long do clients typically work with you?
Well, like I
guess
said,
on an engagement.
I have one client that's I've worked with for 14 years, and it's a very cozy, great relationship, because I know exactly what stories he likes and exactly what stories he wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, so to speak. But top clients are usually 3 or 4 years. As I had mentioned, you know, that's why I price myself mid-range, because I like to see myself working. I love the long-term relationship more than I do something short-term.
Excellent. And we had a whole bunch of people just chime in. What was Amy's name? If you could repeat that, please.
Oh, Flurry, Flurry.
Great. Excellent. Thank you so much. So that's our questions, Andrew. That was fantastic. There was
Well,
a ton
thank
of buzz.
you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate you asking if I gave a presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there was a lot of good feedback there. Zoe loved it too. She was pretty active in the channel.
Yay.
Good
Thank you,
stuff.
everyone, and have a
All right.
wonderful
Thanks,
day.
Andrew. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.